that? Oh, we can do better than that. Season 2, let's go! Hey there, CNCers! I'm going to show you how to turn your favorite photos into an absolutely amazing sign with Vcarve 12's new Sketchcarve toolpath. Let's go! It's a very common thing to have a name and origin sign out front of your cottage or your trailer. Even people with travel trailers will have them when they stop, so they pop out their sign in front of their space and people know who they are and where they're from. While there definitely is a cottage trailer culture component to this idea, signs like this can go way beyond that to everyday houses and spaces. Quotes and sayings, informational, graphics, addresses, numbers. There are so many different types of signs out there, it is crazy. Signs are definitely one of the most popular projects you can make with your CNC. The end goal for this video is to teach you how to use the new Sketchcarve toolpath in Vcarve 12. Don't worry, that's exactly where we'll end up. Eventually. However, this project had a few extra growing pains that I wanted to share with you so that you can learn about some new materials to go with your new toolpath. If you aren't interested in the rabbit hole that is my brain, now would be a good time to skip ahead to the tutorial part of this video. If you are interested in seeing me overthink everything and my attempts to make the best possible videos for you all, then go and get your popcorn. It started when I had this brainwave where I wanted to try a new material for creating the sign versus, let's be honest, typical wood. I figured I'm making a sign, so let's use what the sign people would use. Colorcore HDPE. If you don't know what that is, that's 2 or 3 layers of different colored, high density polyethylene basically melted together. The other option was PVC. Something in that vein. Colorcore HDPE is super durable, UV stabilized, and it cuts really nice on a CNC. But the further I got into my experiments and research, the more I realized that there were some cons to my material change-up that I hadn't really expected. I'll try to break this down to keep it short but informative. HDPE can't be painted. Dead in the water unless you want just one color, which I didn't. Okay, so what about this Colorcore HDPE stuff? Colorcore HDPE is expensive. Very expensive, like jaw-droppingly, shockingly expensive, to the tune of 600 plus Canadian dollars for a 4x8 sheet. That's not gonna happen. And you're on a limited color selection. Of the colors available, none really appealed to me, to be totally honest. And Colorcore HDPE isn't, at least for me, an off-the-shelf item locally, so it's a little harder to come by. So I thought, what about PVC? Aha! PVC is gonna rescue the project. You can paint PVC. Amazing. I can do whatever color I want now, right? PVC is relatively affordable for what it is. Again, durable, meant for the outdoors, cuts pretty nicely. I was able to find it at my local big box store. It doesn't come in big sheets per se, but it can be glued together relatively easily, so, check, check, check. I thought I had found my material unicorn. PVC carves pretty nice. It took me a few tests to dial it in, but, nothing too major, until I started experimenting with the painting and the sanding side of the process. I did a quick test carve and painted it. That's when I found out that when you sand PVC, it very quickly loses that nice shiny finish that makes you feel happy. This is also how I found out that the PVC trim boards that I bought had a foam interior versus solid PVC. It's all good. I'll just mask the PVC and I won't have to worry about sanding at all. Yes! Except for the fact that the masking basically gets shredded because of the tiny, tiny fine details from the photo I'm using. Now, this is the point in the video where I will admit my, shall we say, manicness for having a vision and wanting to see it through can be a roadblock from time to time. It took me a little bit to realize that what I pictured versus what the tutorial's purpose was weren't necessarily the same thing, and that was okay if they weren't. But I had to move on. Clearly, I could have continued to find workarounds for the PVC, but the entire point of these videos is to present useful information that people can use to create their own projects that are what we consider fairly easy to complete, not some epic jungle voyage to prove your manhood. So I tucked my tail and accepted a certain level of defeat and decided that I would come back to my good old buddy, solid wood. We've had good times together. I tested some maple and poplar scraps, and both yielded pretty decent results. However, I had enough poplar in the shop to do a couple of glue-ups as big as I needed, so it won out. I'll give a quick rundown of my glue-up process a little down the line in this video. I would truly love to tell you this is where the tutorial starts and my trials ended, but I'd be lying. However, this is where some of the good info starts for creating the actual project. There are tutorials out there for the Sketchcarve toolpath that use what I would consider fairly clean images to create the toolpath. By clean, I mean fairly simple, solid colors, sharp hard lines. I would almost consider them vector images versus the typical pixel-based photos. And there is nothing wrong with these images at all. Let me be very clear, if anything, they are easier, probably easier to work with and produce fantastic results. But I was determined to use photos because of the emotion that comes from using them. I know AI has come in absolute leaps and bounds over the last year, but it simply cannot replace the sentimentality of a photo, special place, event, thing, or person. You all have at least one photo that gives you goosebumps. You know what I'm talking about. So that's why I wanted to use photos. Having the ability to recreate that moment in recognizable form is huge. Recognizable being the key. So what does all this background info have to do with Sketchcarve? My experiment showed me that simplifying the photo you want to use can affect the legibility of the final carving. Yes, having too much detail can be a bad thing. Now, keep in mind, the results will likely vary for each photo you're trying to use, so you may have to tweak and experiment to find what works best for your photo, maybe every time. But we're going to give you some good basics to start with. Setting up the Sketchcarve toolpath was actually very easy. Like, Vectric nailed it, super easy. I'm going to show you just how easy it is in just a second. I know, I've said that too many times, but trust me, we are almost there. The difficult part was putting the seat time and experimentation in to get the results I was after. So what did I use to simplify my photos so there was just the right amount of detail and so my audience could still follow along? I did a lot of tests. A gross amount actually, in order to satisfy my desire to see my vision through. When I broke it down, you got a couple of options. Photoshop or Illustrator. Of course, not everyone has these and I know this, so you can always use the freebie versions, which are GIMP and Inkscape. You can use any of these types of software options to tinker with filters and trace settings to see if they turn out something that Sketchcarve is able to interpret into a lovely looking carve. However, what I found yielded the best results for my particular photo was actually an online photo styler converter thingy. Yes, that is the technical term for it. The best part of these online photo styler converter thingies is that there are so many of them out there with tons of different style options, and a lot of them are free. I found one called Be Funky that had the right amount of simplification while retaining enough detail for my photo to still be recognizable. Remember that word? Now that you know all of that, we can finally get the party started. Import your image. You can try the image straight up or with filters applied. It totally depends on what you're looking for out of your carving. I'm beyond fortunate to have our little place up north, and given that Cottage Country CNC is filmed up here, I thought it was about time to have a nice sign to show off. This is super simple. Position and scale your image until you're happy with the position and scale. I wanted to crop my image to be a specific size, so that's what I did. Select your image, select Sketchcarve toolpath. You've got a few options within the toolpath itself. I am using bitmap as my selection. I haven't actually messed with the 3D model as a selection yet. Maybe I'll do another video with that as an option. Or maybe you guys can and post the results on the socials. We love it when you guys interact with us. For cutting depth, you can set a flat depth if you'd like to. As of right now, I'm not going to because my VBit won't be going down too far. I'm running a CNC 60-degree VBit to get all those fancy details to pop. I found the Poplar seemed to be pretty happy being carved at about 60 inches per minute with this guy. Machine limit boundary. I'm using my bitmap boundary because I've already cropped my image with a vector. If you decide to select a different vector to define the boundary, this is where you change that. The line thickness is what will determine what details are created from your image to create the actual toolpath. I found 3 gave enough detail, but feel free to slide the slider until you're happy with the results. Let's look at what we've got so far. With just a few clicks of the mouse, look at how cool this thing looks already. I am planning on painting the carved image parts a tealish kind of color, so changing the preview global fill to teal will help me get a feel for what it will look like. It's pretty unbelievable that we can create such a detailed toolpath relatively easily. I want to add some other fancy design elements to the sign to really bring it home. First, I want to add a welcome me, welcome message to my sign. Type out what makes you feel warm and fuzzy, and tweak to your heart's content. Add a Vcarve toolpath with a 60-degree VBit and you've instantly added to the amazingness of this sign. I want to have a clean but somewhat fancy edge all the way around my sign, so I'll use a molding toolpath for that. Create one circle for the path and one smaller circle for the profile for the sweep. The profile can be as simple or as fancy as you'd like. I'm choosing simple because there's so much detail in the photo being carved already. Enter into edit node mode and delete those unneeded segments. Select the outer circle, then the half circle. Create a molding toolpath. It says right in the toolpath description that the profile is the last vector selected. Order matters here. You can experiment with the toolpath position slider, but I want mine to be at the surface of my material, so that's where I'll leave it. Our CNC 1/4 inch ball nose should carve this quite nicely. 1/4 inch depth of cut, 100 inches per minute. With most of the settings I have for this project, I was messing around in gSender as it was going, but that's a good start. Vary step over will basically adjust the step over to the specific model shape to give you the best finish possible instead of a generic computed number. No clearance tools. I found it didn't save much time carving, and there are no sharp corners because my piece is round. Next, I'm creating a pocket by offsetting some circles, a 1/4 inch 2-flute downcut end mill at a 1/4 inch depth of cut, 100 inches per minute, ramped to 0.15 inches, will take no time at all. I'm going to copy the outer circle to create a profile toolpath. Using the same 1/4 inch downcut bit should give me a nice clean cut all the way around. 1/4 inch depth of cut, 100 inches per minute. I added tabs to this one. Are you starting to sense the theme here? I'm going to cut this on the vector to ensure there's no strange ridges left over from the molding toolpath. The preview looks freaking amazing, and I hope you're finding it fairly easy to follow along. Save your toolpaths, group them together if you want, and we are off to learn how I glued my boards up. Fast as lightning, here we go. I cut my boards to the length I needed, approximately 20 inches. Line up the board edges that you want to join together. Mark them with a line and a letter to make them easier to remember to match up which is which. Using tape and CA glue or double-sided tape, secure some scraps of wood to the top boards you want to join. These scraps will hold the bottom boards together while you saw through them. Using your table saw, cut right down the middle of the two bottom boards. Repeat as many times as needed and you'll have clean edges to glue together. Slather both edges with glue, clamp them together, and let them dry. Sand them so they're ready to be carved and we can finally let some wood chips fly. I am beyond thrilled with how this thing is going. I can't even tell you guys. I'm sure every person out there has their own method for prepping materials for painting signs, but I'm gonna run you through mine as quick as I can. Carve your project. Sand the entire thing to help remove the fuzzies. I'm using a nylon bristle brush to scrub in the cracks to get all the extras out. If I was in my shop, I'd use my compressor to give a blast of air to get all the junk out of the cracks. I will then spray some clear coat across the entire surface. This will help avoiding paint bleed when you go to paint. Spray the color of your choice into the carved portions of your project. It's okay if you get a little outside. We're going to paint or sand anyways. If you want the wood to show through, then you're going to want to sand off all that excess spray paint that you get on there. We're going to talk about masking a little bit later. If you're going to paint over the non-carved surfaces, you can skip the sanding step here. If you sanded, now's another good time to give, another blast of compressed air. If you are deciding to paint your top surfaces, you are going to take a fairly stiff foam roller, being really careful not to push down into the cracks, and you can just roll it back and forth and it will eventually fill in the top part and leave the cracks the color you like. Sometimes, no matter how careful you are with this process, there are some paint touch-ups needed. You may want to give a super light sanding, another air blast to get rid of all the last stuff, and then your final epoxy, spar, or spray clear, whatever you choose to use to protect your project. For those that don't know me by now, it's become a bit of a thing that I change my mind last minute on projects. Moving forward, I will be calling these Scottables. For the main part of the sign, if I were to paint it, I'd use good old exterior latex paint. I don't have a particular brand that I love, so use what you got. And the same can be said for the colors and the carvings part. I don't really have brand loyalty, so as long as it's exterior grade, it's probably good enough to go. When it comes time to protect the project that you just spent all these hours making, make sure you're using something that is rated for the outdoors. I was toying with epoxy for this project, but when I checked the weather forecast, they were calling for, and we are receiving temps that are way too hot and humid for the epoxy to cure properly. I gotta be honest, I really do want to try doing an epoxy style top coat, so comment below if you want to see me give that a whirl in a future project. So instead of epoxy, I'm going to use an exterior rated spar urethane or an outdoor urethane. Helmsman is also a really good one, but it has a bit of an amber hue, so if you're going over something light colored, you may want to go something that's more water based because it will give you crystal clear versus that amber hue. or accept that it's going to have an amber hue to it. I would love to hear what your favorite outdoor protectants are, so drop a comment down below and share your knowledge. Remember, I was talking about masking before. I'm sure some of you will ask why I didn't paint the board first and then use masking to cover the paint before carving. Let me tell you, my experiments showed me that no matter how sticky stuck I applied the masking, the amount of detail in the photo or carving would slice it right up and the masking would just peel right off, thus rendering it pretty well pointless. I'm sure if there were less detail, you know, like a sign with just big letters, the masking would hold up, and in that case, I would probably go that route. If you've got a way to keep your masking in place, even with a ton of tiny details, please comment down below so we can all learn. Sometimes you have an idea and it just comes together smooth as silk. Those are easy victories. Other times it's a grind and you want to give up, like this idea was for me. Being able to see those tricky ones through, even if they don't ultimately end up working out, is so important to your growth as a woodworker, DIYer, or craftsperson. The lessons you learn, the wins, the losses, the experiences, all of that will help you down the line. I apologize to everyone for how my brain works. If you think that this video was painful, you should try being my wife. That lady has the patience of a saint, I have to tell you. I know that I gave you lots of great information for both materials and the Sketchcarve toolpath that you're going to use to make amazing projects. And when you make those amazing projects, make sure you share them with us on the socials. Over and over and over and over and over again, thanks for spending some of your time with us. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate that you chose to hang out with us. We have got a ton of stuff cooking behind the scenes these days, so make sure you keep telling everybody about how awesome CNC is. And until the next wonderful fun project, we'll see you around the CNC.